Second, yep.
It is the second now. We
Got
just
it.
got in there.
Calendar.
Last month of the year, 2018 is coming to an end, and you've had quite a step out year for yourself this year musically in the city. So we've seemed like a right time to get the guy into the studio and talk to him about everything.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, you were one of the first people that I met creatively here in Chicago, and I think you were actually the person who introduced me to my current manager, Benjamin Levine.
Well, you're shit. I talk a lot of shit all the time, so
Yeah. Well, it worked out.
Sometimes it's good shit.
It
sometimes
worked
it's
out.
bad.
I'm gonna hire you for consulting just to talk shit in my ear, and we'll
All
see
right,
what
wait.
plays out.
If anybody else needs some shit talk for them, let me know.
That's the guy.
Got hourly rates going right now. But anyway, tell me a little bit about you. Since we met, which was like last year this time, I believe, or a little bit earlier, you've been on a run of a lot of singles, put out a lot of music. You've been very busy. For those of you, or those of you out there in Twitter land, no, I'm just kidding. For those out there who don't know what you've been up to, fill them in a little bit on what Apache Gross, who Apache Gross is. If I'm saying that wrong.
Yeah, no, you
Make
got
them-
it. So yeah, I'm a alternative R&B artist. I was born in Arizona. I was raised in California. Came out to Chicago about 3.5 years ago, kind of just on a different mission. Always been a musician, but was in the corporate world at the time. About 2.5 years ago, quit my job, one-way ticket to London, guitar, played from London to Japan, came back, started a music career.
When you say you played from London to Japan, what does that mean?
I mean, you get your guitar and you just start playing and see who will listen.
Like, were you like busking on streets, or were you like catching gigs? Did you know people? Like,
Well, so
give some
that-
context.
That was the thing, is I never asked for money. But the cool thing about Europe is if you're an American who can kind of sing and you've got a guitar and a video camera, I remember the first experience was in Madrid. I was in an alleyway of my hostel, and I was just like trying to record myself playing. And after I got done singing, it was like John Mayer. A couple times I looked up and it was like 20 people on their balconies just like looking down.
Where was this at?
This was in Madrid.
Okay.
It was just like in some alleyway, and then that's when the first person asked me, "Hey, will you come play at my bar?" And they, put a little jar out, fed me some food. Then from there, I went to Barcelona, got a little mini like residency in a St. Jordi hotel. So I would just play, get some free food,
That's what's up.
stay.
So you really just showing up places like,
Yeah.
hey, I got this guitar.
Well, because I didn't have
It's
a.
very like, it's very like 80s Tom Cruise.
I
movie.
know, right? Well, I didn't like have,
dope.
I didn't have a plan, I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
just, I knew that like the path I was on wasn't the one for me, and I was, I needed to get away, reset, find myself,
No, I
eat,
mean,
pray, love.
That's real, though. I mean, I think it's interesting, especially when you have so many artists, and this city especially, but, everywhere in the world they exist, where, from the day they were born, they knew exactly what their artistic endeavor was going to be or what their message was to the world. But the rest of us, we have to, like, adventure through the world,
Those
have some ups
cats
and
are lucky.
downs, find some things, right?
Yeah.
How did that, like, journey that you were on kind of, because, what, you got all the way to Japan doing this?
Yeah. So I got, and by the time, when I was in Barcelona, I like knew, I like something in my heart was
And that
like,
was, like,
hey.
how far into the journey?
That was like month 2, I think.
Oh, shit, okay.
So I was like,
That's quite a time to be away, though.
Or it was actually like in the first month. So
Right.
I hit London, and then I went to Madrid, then Barcelona. And like when Barcelona, it was like when the heart started working, then went to Italy. And then that's when I shot over to Japan. And I just remember the schedule of being so weird. And I was in this weird cafe that made me feel like it was like an espionage movie. It's like
Okay.
I had a hostel with like sleep pods. And there was this like cafe downstairs where you could buy like a jar of sake for like 500 yen and like some, Japanese whiskey. And I would wake up in the morning at like 5 a.m., go running, come back, shower, go sightseeing for a couple hours, come back, sleep. And I'd wake up at like 6, and I would just sit in the cafe and I would just Google how to be a musician, how to write business plan.
Okay.
And I just like sat there for a week and I just wrote up the plan. I came back to Chicago, got an apartment, put my bed in the living room. My bedroom was this little studio, but my walls are so thin. So my neighbors were just always
hating you.
complaining, hating. And in that first year, that's when I really, because a lot of people don't know my full name is Cody Apache Gross.
Mhm.
So sometimes when people are like Apache Gross and then they hear the word Cody, they're like, how does this guy make up this name?
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah. And it was just, my logic was, there was this whole other side of me that, just was never out in front of people. So I
Mhm.
decided to, transition into my middle name and last name. But that's when I created the brand. I put out my first little 6-song EP. I never knew how to produce either. Like I literally just, when I came back, I just was like created like a school for myself. And you know,
Well, I think that's, there's something to be said about that. As a term of like democratized technology, the idea that like, I mean, what we're doing right now,
Yeah.
like usually used to need like a full crew to be
Just
doing
have a
anything
radio
live
station,
and like
yeah.
talking to somebody like this. So yeah, I mean, it's like, I think now I get frustrated with people when they tell me like,
you can't do
I can't do this, or
yeah.
I can't do that. It's like, you might not be the best at it. Like, it's not, I'm not saying that, like you're going to learn how to paint and be Michelangelo, but at least you understand how to paint, be able to talk about painting with somebody or something like that, right?
And if you put enough time into it, it's like it comes with like love. You have to really love something, because learning something, becoming great at something is you not just doing all the fun things, but like taking the time to educate yourself, taking the time to, slow down and do all the miscellaneous items that aren't necessarily the funnest. But you find joy in it because you know it's going to lead to an improvement of your art, an improvement of your life, help you define who you think you are.
So what was like the big things when you arrived back in Chicago? What were you taking from the experience of, going across the world, traveling as much as you were? How old were you when you got back? Like, what was your circumstance?
I think I was like 23 maybe.
All right, so that's a good spot to be.
23, 24, I don't even know.
It's like way different doing that then than doing that at like 33, right?
Oh,
like
yeah, or doing it at like 16,
sure,
or
sure.
18.
23
people
seems
go
like
abroad and they haven't seen the world. I had already had a full mini career in like advertising and like found like success in the world of business. So it's like I had built an identity, and it was more about scrapping that, but still being young enough to go sing about sex and drugs in my music.
And making sense.
Not
have it be weird.
So yeah, when I came back, the biggest part was just like the humbleness. Because, when you're like when you're just sitting in your office and you're just making all this money, and you're like, oh, the shit. And then you go see the whole world with a whole bunch of people who just don't care about that.
Yeah.
And like everything you've like identified and defined yourself as is now irrelevant. It really does humble you.
Yeah, that's real.
So you got humble, and then, I also was like, shit, I could restart my life. But like, if I really want this, I'm starting from scratch, you got to just work. So I just got a couple of like online classes to learn how to produce. I just kept reading articles and subscribed to a bunch of blogs to learn about the music of business.
Well, I think it takes like a certain lack of ego to do that too. I think there's so many people today that like, read one article or make one beat or write one sentence or whatever it may be, and they think they are a thing. It takes like a lack of ego or like a sense of understanding of yourself, I think, to take a step back and like teach yourself something and like humble yourself a little bit, like you were saying earlier, like taking that time to like humble yourself and realize you got to like do that hard work and do those things that aren't as fun.
It's like funny though too, because even in that you can like be like a piece of shit, like a humbled piece of shit. It's enlightened.
You could
like
go
I
to
remember
any extreme.
when I came back, I was kind of like, I've seen the world. I understand who I am. And then I put out my first, project, and I was super proud of it. And I was like, this is the greatest thing the world's ever seen. And then like, I didn't know anything about business or anything like that at the time. So I put it out, and then, it was out for like a year and a half, and I had like maybe 3,000 listens. And like now on my latest single, Everything's Paid For, it's been out 2 weeks, and we have 2,500 listens already just on Spotify. So it's
let's go ahead with that segue real quick, because you have been putting out, we haven't gotten a full, am I tweaking? We haven't gotten a full project yet.
No.
Right, okay.
We haven't.
I was like, I was sitting there, I was like, wait, did I just fuck that? No, still have not gotten a full project yet. I don't want to say that's a bad thing, because you've been putting out these cinematic pieces as singles, which is really, as far as, people, there's varying degrees of how people put out a single, but you seem, speaking of extremes, like you seem like you're going really hard with each one. Tell me a little bit about putting so much behind every song you do, and where you're getting like these artistic ideas and some of these freedoms that you were talking about earlier that you can speak about.
Yeah, so I mean, I like the idea of singles, because like when I do put out a full project, I want it to be a complete reflection of my whole journey up into this point. And so I don't want to put out a project yet until I understand exactly like where I'm going to be, because it seems like every year it's a blessing, because life gets more exciting, the story becomes more full, and it's like I'm decrypting myself. But like with the singles, the fun part about them from a music, a creative, and like a business standpoint is like I can reflect on individual stories. So like each one of the singles, it started with Brooklyn Girl, and that individual single was more about the idea of like vanity and kind of like some of those lessons I had learned from like how caught up I got like in advertising, and also how caught up I got like in partying and just doing drugs. It was like I was like polarizing all of these different experiences, but it was all for like this idea of like vanity. So I got to create, you know, individual piece of art that didn't have to be tied to like some bigger story. It's just like, hey, this is a life lesson I discovered.
Almost like a short story.
Short story.
Like a short story from music.
Well, so and also, so the 3 singles I put out was Brooklyn Girl, Poison, and then this last one, Everything's Paid For. And when I write these stories, I grew up watching movies. Like me and my parents, one thing we didn't have a lot of money, but one thing we always did was, as a family, we would go and we would see a movie every weekend at the movie theater. So I just always loved movies. I can't really hold a camera that well. But when I write, I kind of, in my mind, start with a visual process. Like, so I see this movie unfold, and then I kind of like dissect, like in my subconscious, like what does this movie represent? Like, why is this vision so clear to me? And so every one of my songs I make, a music video does come after. So Brooklyn Girl, Poison, you know, Everything's Paid For, all had these, well, so we have a video coming out.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, spoiler alert, spoiler alert.
You had all the visuals that seemed like it was
I blew the surprise, everybody.
The exclusive on Miles House Radio.
Exclusive. But so it's that fun process to be able to write a song and a video kind of simultaneously, and then, you know, produce them. And those are 2 different routes. Like I learned how to produce, and for all 3 of those pieces, though, they were collaborative pieces. You know, when I had After Her, my EP, it was like solely produced with like maybe like 1 or 2 like helping hands here. But these last pieces, it's a lot more fun because I've been able to articulate ideas that my necessary skill set and my instrumentation can't fully develop. But I've met amazing people. Some shout outs, John Marino, who has been with me since the start, wicked guitar player, can help me like visualize and bring those pieces alive. Great homeboy Sal Cordova, who actually, shout out, just dropped a project called The Mountain. He's like
that out.
A wizard at production. It's crazy. Man can disappear in a cave with like some sticks and like a microphone, come out with a whole symphony. And a handful of other people as well. But it's just been a blessing to be able to create those pieces with helping hands that way, and then go and transition into, you know, the visual aspect, which is production is way different. You know, I still like to produce my films. I like to write them and produce them, and then have someone who has the understanding of directing, of cinematography, to help kind of like bring these ideas together. So my partnerships this year was with Pogi Studios, and also with you know, Brett.
Who, sure. Yeah.
Who you are also.
Milwaukee Brett.
Yeah, Milwaukee Brett, aka. But so it's been a really wild year because every single project, there's been amazing things and there's been mistakes.
So when you look at these things, do you have plans to like write short films in the future? Is that like a world that you want to exist in? Where do you see like the Apache Girls project going? From this point, kind of.
Well, so I mean, I think there's just derivatives of like what I want to do. Like solely with my music and my career, I want to tell my story. I want to tell stories that are reflections of my life in music and in my own visual aspects. But you know, I do have a collective called The House. And I want to be able to help play a part in other people's creations as well. Like I didn't realize, like, 'cause my last film, Everything's Paid For, there was like 14 actors, like 4 locations, Louis bags.
Yeah, that's like a full
Bentley.
situation.
Yeah, there was like all these crazy things. And I was like, oh man, producing is hard, but it is really fun when you pull it off. So I also too, just like shout out if anybody has some dope projects and they need like a wicked dope producer. I guess I figured out that I can do that. So
well, that's the way you do it, right? It's like what you were saying earlier. You got to try. If you don't try, then you never figure it out.
True.
I'm a firm believer in that. So you've had when you pick these stories, like something you keep mentioning is like having these stories, you choose certain stories that you want to dive into. And I think anybody who creates raw art, that's what they have to do. You're very passionate. It's very obvious the passion that goes into a lot of these things. What is like the catalyst for most of these stories? Like you kind of talked about the vanity.
Yeah.
Are you pulling these from real life? Are these things that you see in your periphery? Are these things that are like observations on the world at large?
Yeah, so I mean, there's just so much to consume. Like every day,
Well, yeah, the news generally now, right?
yeah. Even just with what your eyes and your ears and your heart picks up on a daily basis, there's 1,000 different things that you could write about. So like for my process is like I have like 50 songs like right now, because how I do is I sit down and I produce a quick beat and I freestyle.
That's like we had Rich on a few weeks ago, and he was saying the same thing. He's just always got a ton of music.
Yeah, it's a ton of music, and like how I tap into these is, I just freestyle. And I know, look at this game is just going on.
Sorry, guys, the Bears are fucking up right now. They just fucked up. That was it.
I was like also too. I was trying not to look at the TV. I kept like peeking over.
It's live. It's all right. It's all right. We can do these kinds of things here. My bad. We cut you off.
No worries. So it's like all of these stories, are reflections, but they're subconscious. And when they come out, and then when you're listening to certain pieces, they just catch your attention.
Yeah.
So it's like I could have written about a variety of different stories, but I write about the ones that kind of just hop out. And when I listen to it, at least because first and foremost, like outside of all the different types of art I make, I see myself as a musician. So it's really important.
That's like your driving artistic.
That's my driving artistic. So outside of everything else, the way I think something could look or this or that, it's the way that something sounds, the audio that I hear. And so when I just heard like those songs, it's just like, even when they're just like this really, really basic, scratchily beat with, music to it, it's like, I'm like, that's dope. That's going to be something. And then I just like go crazy on it and spend way too much time making it super produced. And all
that's what it has to be though, right? And I think you see that like in the composition of the things you make and the way your music comes out and stuff like that. I think you definitely see that there's a intense passion behind it. Like I think anyone I've talked to about your videos of music, that's the first thing they bring up. So it's coming through, my man.
Yeah,
well done.
And it was like too with this last one as well. Like every process has been hard. Because they've been so different. I've worked with a variety of different people, but on this last song, since it's out, specifically focus on that. I worked with a duo group called Claude the Money, which is Boyan Massaposa. And Massapolo?
I think.
Don't hate
that
me,
Italian guy, Boyan.
That black Italian guy. And then Paige Callup, which is just a really amazing duo. And like how everything's paid for was we just came over, got a little smoke, got a little drink, was hanging out in this jam lounge at my apartment, and I just pressed record. And
jam lounge at your apartment.
It was, it's like a jam. It's like weird. In the first session, you can just hear like all the reverb because it's this weird like cathedral hall. So we just sat down and we just played this song and just started doing a little freestyling, and then like it just flowed. And it was a different sound though, because for most of my pieces I make dark alternative R&B, right? So a lot of these other songs they feel heavy, this and that, and so Everything's Paid For was like one of the first pieces I put out. They kind of just has like a fun, like light playfulness, and I most times that comes out in the summer.
Yeah, right.
But I think it's funny because we're going into the winter.
Well, it kind of fits your vibe, right?
Yeah, and I'm like, hey guys, if you're indoors and all sad, try to listen to this and maybe it'll make you feel better.
Well, that's what I always liked about, not to jump off where you're at, but like similar in the sense of like making sad, happy music sort of is like Drama, Niall and Via Rosa, the way they make like that sad, happy music, perfect for this time of year as well. It's like you get like a good vibe, but there's, talking about something like
and it just is, and it's hard. I don't know why it's so hard for me, but like I can have like a very nice, lovely beat, and then as soon as I open my mouth, even if it sounds happy, the lyrics always have like some kind of like Everything's Paid For is about, of the female drug dealer that lives in LA. But I really like it though too, because the narrative of the story is that, and it's based off of a friend that obviously not name dropped or anything, but she's inspiration. Yeah, she's just a really awesome person who's just like badass. Like I'm afraid, like I'm not overstepping any boundaries or anything like that. And I would just see her, she was strong, she was independent. It was like really inspiring, especially like in this modern time. I think there's a lot of discovery you know, with Me Too, this and that. Because I just think that for a long time, and especially like in the music I love, like R&B and, you know, rap, is as an art form, you know, if you've just listened through the decades, a lot of it does kind of take the idea of like a woman and just has it in this musical, slightly derogatory.
I feel you. But I had this conversation with someone recently. It might have been Angel, and we were talking about that. And I feel like that started to happen like in the late '80s and early '90s. Because before that, it was the opposite.
It was like, yeah, it was
or like even the mid '90s, like
sugar
R&B.
pie,
Yeah, like
honey
you still
bun.
had like that. It was like some about the turn of the millennium. I feel like really got misogyny going on a whole new
Yeah.
level that it had already been going on before that. But in the music industry, R&B and rap especially, it got like really bad for like 10, 12 years there.
Yeah.
And now we're starting to see it come back around, even though 6ix9ine is still. We don't talk about
Yeah,
him.
I know, right? Even though it pops up in the news all the time.
I know.
But
It's
so
frustrating.
that was like one of the fun pieces about it, because
That's cool, though, yeah.
my music still does have those sexual aspects to it. But like for me, I've never seen it as like, this is woman. I've just always seen it as like, this is my partner, and this is just
Yeah,
this
well, you're
just
not
happens.
making songs about like throwing somebody on the bed or something like that. It's like, you know what I mean? You're not like punching people in the face. Like you're not
Yeah,
like
of
you're
course.
not like XXX Temptation and people.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I think there's a fine line of like appreciation versus like just being a fucking asshole, and you're very far on the appreciation
Well,
side.
I appreciate that. I'm glad
Yeah,
that
man.
that's what I'm
It's
putting.
tough,
It's
though.
it's
Yeah,
I'm
it is
like
tough. It's
fearful too.
tricky.
I don't want anyone to ever like
You gotta look
hear
those lyrics
something
over
I
a few
make
times.
and then, you know, just pull an assumption about like my belief system, or
Right.
like,
Yeah, and
or
it's
like-
tricky these days.
and it's
especially.
hard though. But that's the trade-off too. Like when you become a musician, it's the craziest thing that we want to do is like, privacy is such an awesome thing, but we're just like, all right, guess I don't need that.
Right.
Ready, tabloids? Let's take my life apart. And like every, you know,
Well,
so
sometimes
like,
you might not even be telling a story, like you said, doesn't directly relate to you. You're telling a story for somebody else.
yeah, and it's just like boom.
In today's society, a lot of people forget that the person telling the story often isn't the person that has the opinion of the story.
I did have one
And
moment.
I think that's interesting.
I had like one moment that I was like, I felt like everything was super awesome, and then I played a So Far show, and a girl came up and called me a benevolent sexist, and I was like,
That's a hell. Shout out that girl for a really great
I mean,
diss off
I know
the top of the
she-
dome. Benevolent sexist.
I
is-
know she called me, and I was just like, it
That's a
took
good
me a second
vocabulary.
to like comprehend, and it was like one of those situations too, because like once again, not my mind, no my belief system, but somebody had just heard my music
Yeah.
and had interpreted it. And now, granted, a lot of other people were like, "Hey, that's great," but it was like that was like a eye-opening thing for
What's
me, and
the-
just like because it was like my first like public criticism about like art that I'm trying to create in this.
Well, that was like what I believe Dave Chappelle said in one of his last stand-ups, where he was talking about issues that he ended up having with not issues he had, but issues that the trans community had with him after his first stand-up special he did for Netflix. And he was talking about how he would never change his jokes for anybody and this and that, and he's making art, and he seemed like he was he toes that line better than anybody. But then at the end, he said that he had somebody come up to him and say kind of what you just said. Someone come up to him after a show and said, "Hey, I love your stuff, but this made me feel bad about myself." And he said, "That's not what I'm here to do at all.
Yeah.
The last thing I want you to do is come to my show and feel bad." So he's like, as much as I think those jokes are funny, I'm gonna I'd make an effort to change the way I do those things, because I don't want a single person to come. If you have one person come to your show and they're alienated by what you're doing, then you've kind of failed as an artist, right?
Yeah, no, for sure, 100%. I mean, that is just in art in general, especially when you draw inspiration from past pieces, it is always important to stay current and like understand and like continue to educate yourself too with like just whatever topic is going on in this world. It's like as a society, we are changing, and some people do just want to create a work of art to create it. And then other people want to create a work of art to help people understand what's going on in their own life, to understand all the horns are just going crazy outside.
We almost made it a full.
Without the horns, does that happen?
Yeah, man. If you drive on Halstead or 18th and you honk your horn, I'm gonna find you and beat you on this.
You're
It's
interrupting
the most
it.
annoying thing in the world. Yeah, but also we got to get some curtains on this bitch.
Yeah, because just looking out the window. But
my
yeah,
bad.
no worries. So that's just the idea is I create that tell stories that help people understand like what they're experiencing, that can offer as a distraction. Like at the end of the day, I don't want anyone to listen to my music and like leave worse than they are.
Yeah,
I want them to leave with a new story, that if they didn't know this lifestyle exists, that they do, and it's a possible option. Or, if, they're feeling some form of pain or confusion, that these stories can help them understand that, because that's what music was for me. Growing up, even with Linkin Park's Emotional Ass, or like 3 Day Grace's like angry stuff, it was an outlet to normalize what I was feeling, and to help me get past my issues and to grow. And like that's the ultimate like dream, would be able to create music that one gets you rich, and also
do you think there's anyone who like makes music with the idea that like I want everyone to go home just really upset? There's got to be somebody.
There's got to be. No, for sure there are.
There's got to be someone making music.
It's
like
it's
like
interesting
to see.
There's a lot of rap songs too where they're like, "My life's so cool, you're a loser."
Right.
I know. And like I don't know, I still leave feeling cool even though he told me I'm a loser.
Like,
but
damn,
I like wonder what his intention really
better
was.
Than me. Well, shit, man. Thank you so much for coming through. This has been amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me before we leave though, what's coming up on the horizon?
Yeah.
2019 is coming up. We're almost at 2020. What do you have coming up next few months? Where can people see you play? What do you have for the New Year's coming, if anything? Run me through it real fast.
Okay, so quick rundown. Next show, Arizona. It's going to be in Valley Bar, like 250 people. So we got to show up.
Listeners.
For the Arizona listeners, I know you're out there. We got to show up and rock it out. I just started filming a short YouTube series related around just some broken down music.
Cool.
Because like I grew up playing just like guitar and singing with all this heavy production. So there's gonna be original pieces. It's gonna be some covers, but just something fun that like can come out like weekly, that people can
keep creatively.
Keep kind of just feel something that's a little bit more stripped down and raw.
Sure. Yeah.
Music video should be coming out early 2019 for Everything's Paid For. And then I am working on a update on my life, because like I said, the first little EP I put out was kind of like an update up until that point. So not a full story, but just up to that point, and a lot has changed since then. Next chapter, but kind of also too just on some like, it's not like a full like, hey, pay really hard and you're going to understand exactly where I'm at, but that should be coming out probably mid 2019. And then I have a cool little blues project that I'm working on.
Well, shit.
Yeah,
sounds like a lot. Sounds like 2019 is gonna be as busy as 2018.
Yeah, but right now, if you want to hear the newest, latest, and greatest, go to ApacheGross.com. Everything's Paid For. That new single is out. Give it a listen if you have not. I know if you haven't.
Spotify, SoundCloud, Pandora, Tidal.
Yeah, pretty much like
everywhere.
Everywhere. The internet now, you can find it.
All right, man. Well, thank you again so much for coming on. Appreciate you as always. This has been Mild Sauce Live with Apache Gross. As always, I'm Jake Krez, and we'll be back probably next week. We'll see. Peace.
Bye.